Guys remember somebody wrote a letter to Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura is a Jewish author and a radio host, and she gives advice about relationships, parenting, ethical dilemmas based on the Old Testament. And so this person, he's basically attacking Dr. Laura, and this is what he said, if you guys remember. Thank you for doing so much to educate people regarding God's law. I have earned a great deal from your show. When somebody tries to defend the homosexual lifestyle, for example, I simply remind them in Leviticus 18:22 clearly that it is an abomination. End of debate. However, I do need some advice from you, however, regarding some of the specific laws and how to follow them. A friend of mine feels that even though eating shellfish is an abomination, it is less abomination than homosexuality. I don't agree. Can you settle this? Okay. So again, in Leviticus 11, and that's what we'll be talking about today, it talks about how, hey, eating shellfish is not good. It's going to make you unclean, which is therefore a sin. Next one. I know from Leviticus 11 that touching the skin of a dead pig makes me unclean, but still, may I still play football if I wear gloves? Okay. So let me show you a funny picture. Oh, before that. All right. So this is, so what would you like to eat for Sabbath lunch? And the baby's like, pork sandwich. And then he looks back at him. He's like, haystacks, haystacks. Good old SDA humor. Number one, share your, let's do some discussion questions. Share your experience growing up as the SDA. Was it hard for you to keep the food laws? Why or why not? And if you didn't grow up SDA, then what did you think of these food laws when you came in contact with an SDA person? So if you were SDA, what did you think about these food laws? If you're not SDA, then what did you think about it when you came in contact with SDAs who are keeping these laws? Mm, mm, mm. Okay. Sarah, how about for you? Mm, yeah, yeah. Mm, mm, yeah. Mm, okay. So keeping it yourself wasn't a big deal. It was more telling your friends about it. Sure. Anybody else? Josh, Kevin, Hejin, Trudy, Tracy. Any? Do you guys want to share experiences? You don't have to, but any of you guys that want to share? Pork is like a pretty main thing. Mm, mm, mm. Thanks for that, Luis. Anyone else? Josh, Kevin, Trace, Trude. Okay. 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 Mm. Mm. Sure. Mm. So never, it was never really a big deal for you. Mm. 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 Okay. Okay. Thanks for sharing, Trude. For me, I remember in Korea, um, I went to a non-SDA school, and then they would have this thing called don't I forgot what it's called. It's like 동그랑 thing or something, and it's like the literal translation, Louis. It's like a circle. It means like 동그랑 something. So basically, it was like a large like ham, and they cut it, and then they would like you would cover it up in egg. And I remember like man, when I was young, that looked so good. And all my friends would be eating it. And I would be eating like broccoli or something, and I'll be like, man, that looks amazing. And so I remember that was like the one thing I always wanted to eat. And then also, I really like katsu. Do you guys, Luis? Do you know what katsu is? Yeah. Tonkatsu. Yeah, tonkatsu. Yeah, but that's pork too. I mean, there is chicken katsu and fish katsu now more readily available, but I remember back then it was like only a lot of places were only pork, and so I remember that. I also remember there was a McDonald's when I was in Korea. It was I think it was something else, maybe Loteria, but I remember the hamburger patties were all pork as well, because pork is cheaper than beef, at least in Korea, and so I remember I couldn't eat that either. And so I remember those are all the foods that I wanted to eat when I was younger. Trudy kind of already answered this, but how about for you guys? Why do you think God gave these food laws? Healthy? Okay. Any other? So is it only health, or do you think there? Okay, I know. All right, two people already said health. Is there any other? What do you mean? So same thing. Health reason then. Same thing. Okay. Anyone else that think it might not have been a health reason, but something else? Okay. Sarah, Trace, Hejin, Josh. Any other thoughts or answers? All right. Do you think Christians need to keep the food law even today? Because many Christians, they know that this law is in there, or actually many Christians don't. But most of the Christians who do know it, they would say, no, 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 no. That's Old Testament stuff. Okay, we don't keep a lot of the Old Testament laws. Why do we keep the food laws? But what about you guys? Why do you think, or do you think that Christians need to keep the food laws today? And if so, why? By the way, you don't need to necessarily know the answer because we're gonna go over it today. But just your thoughts. Even though, so like everybody knew about it, but they didn't talk to him about it? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, it's called, it starts with a T. I have it somewhere in the slide. Yeah, trichinosis. Yeah, you're right, you're right. I have it somewhere. Okay. So, Luis, I'm guessing you're saying it still applies to us today because. Okay. So, if it was bad for them then, it's still bad for us now. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Anyone else? Sarah, Josh, Kevin, Trace, Hedgen. Do you think Christians need to keep the food law even today? Okay. Oh. Hmm. Hmm. Sure. Hmm. Okay. 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 Thanks for that, Hejin. All right. Well, let's get into it. Um, First, I want to address people who say, okay, what's the whole big deal? Okay, there's quite a bit of SDAs now, even that I know, or SDAs and non-SDAs, but mostly non-SDAs would say this, but even some SDAs would say, come on, like, what's the big deal? Like, like, it's just food, you know? Like, is it a sin or is it not sin? Like, come on, like, that's not a big deal anymore. Um, but we have to understand that the same argument can be made about Adam and Eve. Okay, if you think about it, the original sin, the first sin, at least on earth, it was actually over food. Okay? So we don't get to decide what is big or not a big deal. God does. So we have to understand that. Okay. If you go in thinking, oh, I don't want to follow this law, or I think I just want to eat this, then you'll find what you're looking for. Okay. And so what I'm trying to say is the principle has to be always, what does the Bible say? Okay, what does the Bible actually teach us? That's going to be the most important thing. All right. I'm going to give you guys three different, there's a lot more than this, obviously, but I'm going to give you three main reasons why people think that God gave these laws in the first place. Okay? The first one is symbolism of holiness. Okay, I'll show you guys what I mean by this. This is very interesting. I actually never heard of this one before. So if you guys look at Genesis 1, God divided the animals into three different spheres. Okay? If you guys remember, on one of the days, God made water animals and air animals. And then another day, he made land animals. Okay, so there are three different spheres. Okay? So if you look at, this argument is, if you look at Leviticus 11, God deems that animals that mix or blur these categories, they're unclean. Okay? So if the land animal blends in with air or water, they're unclean. Or if a water animal, okay, either goes to land or air or is blurred, or air animal, all that stuff, if they're mixed up somehow, then you see that these animals are actually unclean. These unclean animals transgress their boundaries and overlap spheres. Okay? So, for example, unclean animals, birds like pelican, inhabit both water and sky. Okay, so do you see how it's both? Unclean insects that have many legs operate both on land and air. They could stay on the land and they could also stay on the air. But bugs like locusts and grasshoppers, okay, well, not all of them, but some of them, they actually hop on the ground. So they're not really necessarily flying. They're just hopping. So this was the idea. Unclean animals symbolized, so that's why this is called symbolism. The unclean animals symbolized what Israel was to avoid, which was mixing in with the unclean beliefs and the practices of the surrounding nations. So the whole point, the whole idea of God, remember, if you remember, God said over and over again, I want you to be holy. I'm telling you guys this because I want you to be holy. So the idea of holiness is what? To be set apart. And so the whole mindset is you need to be set apart. You need to be set apart. Okay, there's clean and unclean. Okay, these foreigners, they're unclean. Okay, and I have made you holy. And so God is trying to teach them, according to this argument, you see these animals, you see, they're mixing when it should be one sphere. They were created for land, so they should be within the land. Or they were created for water, so they should be within water or air, whatever. Okay? And so these animals, they're always mixing. But I want to show you that everything, okay, including your food, you have to be mindful of that. Okay? So it's not even about these animals necessarily being clean or unclean or healthy or unhealthy. It's really about thinking about, hey, holiness, thinking about not mixing in. Okay? So God set Israelites apart and made them holy nation. So God did not allow any overlaps, any compromises between Israel and its neighbors. Okay? So therefore, the animals themselves are not internally unclean. And according to this argument, Jesus also affirms that all foods are actually clean. Okay, so again, it was just the symbolism. And it only, and we're going to see later how people who believe in this, obviously they would say, oh, it doesn't refer to us now. Because this was just for the Israelites back then. Because for them, it was about being holy and not holy. Okay, and it was avoiding the non-Israelites. But obviously for us as Christians, we don't do that anymore. Okay, for us, we still, obviously we shouldn't mix in like our beliefs and practices and things like that, but we still interact with people who are non-Christians. Okay, because our it's different now for us. It's a different context. Okay, that's number one. Any questions, clarifications on the first one? All right. Number 2, symbolism of the type of people. Okay, the first one is symbolism of holiness, symbolism of type of people. By the way, the first two, and I guess all three, doesn't have to necessarily be contradictory to each other. It could be a mixture of these things too. Number 2, God wanted the people of Israel, okay, to take care of the weak. That's first part. And the second part is to be perfect, the holy, the idea of being holy, to be made in God's image. Okay? However, if you look at the unclean animals, they are either, number 1, predatory animals. Okay, we'll talk about more what that means. So they're predators. Or number 2, they're vulnerable animals. Okay, for example, they could be very defective in appearance or characteristics. God did not want the Israelites to be predators in their human relationships. Okay? They were forbidden to eat blood because it represented life. Okay? So again, as Israelites, okay, they wanted the relationships, human relationships, they didn't want them to take advantage of weak people. Okay? So therefore, they didn't want them to also eat animals that took advantage of other animals. Okay? Again, it's a symbolism. It's like, oh, why am I not eating these kind of animals? Oh yeah, they're predators. Oh yeah, in my life, I shouldn't be a predator either. Because it's easy for humans, because of sin, to take advantage of weak people. They were commanded, the Israelites, to defend the poor, the widow, and the foreigners. And then another example is God forbade priests with blemishes to not come near the altar. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember, but a long time ago in the beginning, I think last year, I gave a sermon on this. Okay, the whole concept is you gotta be like, you can't have any like disability or any kind of unholy things as a priest. You have to be basically perfect. You can't be like blind, or you can't be deaf or something like that. Okay, so the whole concept is, it's this idea of God wanting perfection for every single human being. Not because those disabled people are worse than us, but God made us perfectly. And so he wanted his representatives to be perfect as well. Okay, so again, it's this idea, when you look at an animal and you go, oh, this animal is defective, or this animal looks really, really ugly. Okay, when you see that, you go, okay, that's not how God made us. God made us to be perfect. So here's some examples of this. Owls, falcons, hawks are predatory and consume other animals' blood. Land animals that do not chew the cud eat other animals or even dead ones. Okay? And then all the clean animals, according to Leviticus 11, all of those animals, they don't eat other animals. Okay? They're not predatory, these kind of things. Also, this is an example of these vulnerable animal or defective in appearances. Chameleons have its lumpy face, the high humped turtles and beetle. Think of the blindness of worms and bats, the vulnerability of fish without scales. Okay, so again, these are all the different animals that are supposed to be unclean. In short, holiness and predatory behaviors don't mix. And also, holiness and imperfection don't mix. It represents respect for human life. It also respects human original design, not the fallen state. Okay, so again, God, not for health reasons, okay, but God wanted to remind them that, hey, us as Israelites, again, you have to continue to remember that you can't be a predator. You can't take advantage of people who are vulnerable. And on top of that, you have to remember that you have to be perfect, or you were created for perfection, and that we shouldn't be okay with non-perfection. Any questions, clarifications on this one? Okay, Number 3 is one that all of you guys are very, very familiar with, which is the health reason. So this one, I don't need to go over it too much. You guys know pigs were garbage disposal for the ancient people. Same with shrimp and lobsters as well. And then the argument is almost all of the creatures on the unclean list are scavengers. So not only are they predators, a lot of them are scavengers. Okay? They don't hunt for their own food. They eat the dead and decaying matter, which is very, very obviously it's not very good. But if you look at the clean animals, all clean animals are herbivores. So they basically don't eat animals. The land animals would ruminate, which means they eat and then they throw it back up and then they chew on it again and they keep doing that. Their stomachs consist of 4 chambers, which allows them to eliminate bacteria, toxin, and parasites. Okay, whereas these unclean animals, they're eating all the bacteria, toxin, and parasites. So you can get all kinds of diseases from eating unclean meat. For example, shrimp raises your cholesterol level. Okay? So this is what one doctor said. As we look at modern science and nutrition, we will find that there is an amazing overlap between God's original law of clean and unclean and solid hygienic principles. Scriptures and medical research agree that modern lifestyles lived without reference to God's laws and design shorten life and hasten death. So again, I mean, a lot of you guys already have mentioned it already. So a lot of modern science is actually backing this up quite a bit. Okay, that basically, if you continue to eat these unclean animals, then it's gonna shorten life and then hasten death as well. And then I also, if you guys remember the video that I showed last week, that also shows you a pretty good example that SDAs, based on I mean, it's not all SDAs, but on average, these SDAs who follow these laws, okay, they live 10 years longer. Okay, so that's the health reason. So again, let's review. Number 1, it's a symbolism of holiness. So the animals themselves, they're not unclean or clean. It's just a symbolism to show you, hey, remember, we can't mix. Number 2, it's a symbolism. Again, the animals inherently, they're not bad in itself. It's more about symbolism of what kind of people we need to become. And number 3, although animals themselves, they're very, very unhealthy. And so therefore, that's why they're deemed unclean. Okay. Any questions or clarifications? Okay, so let's come back to this. So what would be a good argument for, maybe not a good argument, but what could be some arguments against the first one? Okay. Sure. No, I mean back then. Yeah, so that's why so the Christians would say, yeah, like this no longer that's why we don't need to keep this law anymore though. But how about for people, I mean, just this argument in itself, and this is not necessarily saying we need to keep it. This is the reason why God gave this. Because it doesn't really tell us specifically like why. God doesn't say, oh, don't get this because, of this. Well, it does say like, I am holy and you are holy. But it doesn't really specify what that means. It doesn't say, oh, don't eat these things because it's unhealthy for you. It doesn't really give us a reason. So these are just 3 different reasons of why we think God gave it to us. Sarah? Okay, good. Okay, so not all unclean animals. Okay, actually blur the boundaries. or overlap spears. Okay, so how about those animals then? Okay, so you can maybe make an argument. Maybe this doesn't apply to all unclean. Any other arguments against this? I was thinking, well, I wonder if they would say that, because like I wonder if they would actually say that like these animals were, this is assuming that like God made these animals to be just in one spear, it seems like, right? So like for example, it talks about like pelican, like were they made to be just in the air then? Or because and then like after sin entered into the world, or after Noah's flood, maybe like they had to evolve, or they had to like, because of food or something like that, they had to change. But yeah, it seems like many animals inhabit these different spheres. So like, do they believe that in the beginning that these animals they only belong to specific spheres, or what if God made them to be different spheres? All right, number 2. Do you guys remember this one? Okay, any argument for second one? Any argument that could be made for the second one? No. Okay. So that could be an example. Okay, so not all of the unclean, so same thing, not all of the unclean animals are predatory or vulnerable or ugly looking. And then also I thought of like, well, how do you yeah, it's a very subjective thing. What if like somebody thinks chameleon's lumpy face is actually perfect or something? I don't know, right? Okay, so those are some arguments. How about the third one? Health reason. So people who say, oh, God created these for health reasons. Sure, okay. So they can make the argument, hey, like these are not that bad. And I know some people say even like animals nowadays, or animals like the clean animals, they could be unhealthy for you as well. Okay, there's people who get sick because of cows. There's people who get sick because of chicken or tuna, whatever, right? All right. So again, these are the 3 different reasons. Okay, really, really interesting. This was like so new for me, because I was thinking I was researching about Adventist history, and this is really, really interesting. I hope this is it blows your mind, because it blew my mind. James White, by the way, if you guys remember all of the original, like we went over Adventist history, all of them were Sunday keeping Christians first, if you guys remember. So all of them were not about Leviticus 11, okay? James White, who is Ellen White's husband, he wrote in 1850 that it was settled once and for all using Acts 10. Acts 10 is the story about Peter, where he gets a dream from God and like all these unclean animals. And then anyways, so he used that to say that all foods are clean. Okay, he says, hey, don't you understand? Okay, all foods are clean. In 1860, Ellen White wrote a letter to a lady saying it's okay to eat pork. And James wrote in the back of the letter, we actually just finished 200-pound pork. I mean, he's obviously kidding. But you have to understand, all of the early Adventists, okay, they actually all ate these meat, especially pork. Ellen White even said, if God wanted us to stop eating pork, he would have told the church. Okay, because there was somebody who was saying, oh, we need to keep these rules. And then she said, if you want to do it personally, keep it to yourself. Okay. But during that time, that's when science actually started to show. So nobody, okay, even the early Adventists, nobody said, oh, we need to keep these rules or we need to keep these laws. Nor was it because, oh, like it's unhealthy for you, so don't eat it. Nobody said this. Okay. So they were eating away pork and clam and all this stuff. Okay. But during that time, science started to show that people who ate uncooked pork got trichinosis. Okay. So Adventists said, okay, no more pigs. Okay. But other foods are okay. But this is very interesting. They didn't say no more pigs because of Leviticus 11, nor the Bible. They just said no more pigs because it's not healthy for you. So the whole concept was not because it's in the Bible, because the whole idea is, hey, we want to be healthy. So let's eat foods that are healthy. And pork, especially undercooked pork, it's not good for you. So let's stop eating pork. But other like unhealthy foods, they were like, oh, let's keep eating it. And then in 1863, Ellen White had a vision about the health reform. Okay, basically, like you're supposed, as a church, we're supposed to spread this health message. Okay, to be healthy. Okay, but it was nothing about Leviticus 11. So once again, okay, Ellen White died, okay, not saying any single word about Leviticus 11, okay, or about, oh, how you shouldn't eat all of these other stuff. If anything, the only thing she stopped eating was pork by the time that she died, at least. Dudley Canright, which is an Adventist pastor, in 1865, he started to say it's a sin to eat these things. Okay? So he was the pastor that started to say it's a sin. Before, nobody said it was sin. They just said it's unhealthy for you. It's not good for you. It was only until 1890s that they stopped eating unclean meats altogether. Okay? So again, and then after that, that's when they started looking at Leviticus 11 and they started to realize, oh, a lot of these animals are actually unhealthy for you. Okay? But there was never a vision, or there was never, Ellen White even, never said anything about Leviticus 11. She just said we need to be healthy, if anything. Okay? Again, this was it was mind-blowing for me because I always heard, oh, Ellen White says don't eat this. Ellen White said don't eat that, so you can't eat it. Or, oh, you see, in the Bible, Leviticus 11, don't eat this. Okay? But again, early Adventists at least, they never used that argument. Okay? It was only up until, starting from 1865 until 1890s, that they actually started to say it's a sin. Okay, so very, very interesting. Any questions or clarifications on this? All right. So we went over 3 different reasons of why God gave us this rule. And now we're going to talk about, does it actually apply to us today? Okay? Do we need to keep these rules or these laws? Is it a sin? Is it not a sin? All right. Does it apply to us today? Number 1, if you believe that this was a symbol of holiness, then no, it wouldn't apply to you today. Okay? And that's what a lot of Sunday churches believe. Okay? It doesn't apply to us today. Okay? Because that was for the people of Israel. Okay? They were not to intermingle. They were not to go evangelize and tell people about God. No, they had to be within their realm. But for us as Christians, it's different. If you believe that the reasoning is it's a symbolism of the type of people the type of people we should be, in some sense, I think that could still, I think you can make an argument that would still apply to us today then. Okay? But some people would say, no, it doesn't apply to us anymore. Obviously, a lot of Adventists would say, no, this is health reason, this is health reason. Okay? Then, obviously, that's why it would apply to, that's why a lot of SDAs still say this applies to us today. Okay? But like I said earlier, now, the question really would be, is it a sin? And that's where, there will be a lot of debates. I can't answer that for you. That's for you to decide. But at least the early Adventists did not think so. Okay, even Ellen White did not think so, and she never had a vision about it. Okay, but one thing I think is important is we have to remember that following, if your reason for not eating these things are health reason, following Leviticus 11 or being a vegetarian or vegan doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be healthy, and we all understand that. Okay. And so the important thing is that, like, if you're following Leviticus 11 for health reason, then it should be all parts of your life, not just eating pork or not eating pork, that thing. Okay, just like what Hejin Trudy talked about. I was talking to Woo-Seok from our church, David, and he does a lot of these health seminars and things like that. And then I really liked what he said, and this is what he said. Or I'm summarizing it, but he said something along this line. He said the goal of the health message is not necessarily just to live longer or be healthier. Okay, of course those are the good things, but those are not like the goal. That's not the end. But that we can better connect with God and walk with Him, right? Because if we're healthier physically, okay, then we're going to be spiritually healthier as well. That's really the goal. All right. Any questions, clarifications I can make before we end? What I'm saying is she didn't refer to Leviticus 11. But yeah, of course, there's biblical references, kind of like what Louis talked about, how we use this quite often, which is our body is the temple of God, and so we should take care of it. So things like that, yeah. And also, like, it's a push away from, like, some people say, oh, like, our body doesn't matter. We're going to go to heaven and we're going to get a new body anyways. But instead of thinking like that, the Christianity doesn't really say that. It says we're going to keep our body. It's just going to be renewed. It's not like we throw away our body, and we're just like spirits flowing around. We're actually going to have body. So body is not a bad thing. And so, yeah, I think the health, like being healthy, like physically healthy itself, I think we could see that all throughout the Bible. But she didn't reference Leviticus 11. That's what I was talking about. Yeah. Like she didn't say, oh, we need to keep Leviticus 11 because of health. Like that's why he gave it to us. Like she didn't say anything about that.